Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 16. Red and Gold, Part 1.
I told you to bring a gun, Stark wheezed out.
Yes, you were right. Is that what you want to hear? Stay quiet,
Loki hissed out. I think they can follow the scent of blood anyway.
They will be following a trail of your limbs if you don't shut up.
I can't go this fast. We need to slow down.
Yes, you can, and no, we won't,
Loki told him firmly and gripped Stark's waist a bit tighter to urge him on.
2 days earlier.
You should bring a gun too, Stark remarked offhandedly.
I don't need one,
Loki told him.
I am well capable of protecting myself without one.
It couldn't hurt though, the human insisted. You have a better aim than I do.
No.
Fine, whatever.
Stark grabbed his bag and headed towards the Drake. Loki disliked guns. The energy pulsing in them never failed to make him feel strange. It felt like it was interfering with his magic. Maybe it was a harmless interference, but he still disliked the tingling feeling in his hands whenever he held one of the energy guns. Maybe after he managed to control the cosmic energies around them, it would not be so, but for now, his blade was enough. After this trip, they could finally start forging. Loki planned to start working on some knives, maybe even a sword, and let Stark work on armors. Their so-called workshop was still chaotic, but at least semi-functional. Well, functional for what Loki needed it for. Stark was still not even halfway done with the equipment he needed for his armor and other matters he wanted to use the workshop for. Midgardian science was truly bothersome with the amounts of tools and equipment that was needed for it. When Loki got inside their shuttle, Stark was already ready for takeoff. So he closed the door and went to sit down next to him.
Do you want to bet whether we get in trouble or not?
The human asked cheerfully. You are not taking this seriously,
Loki told him. I hate taking things seriously. Ready to go.
I've been ready for an hour now. You were the one wasting time packing.
I just like to be prepared.
Oh, just let us go already.
Stark chuckled, but didn't argue, and soon they were out in space over planet Kiend. The second Stark saw it, he insisted on landing. It was a green-blue planet, similar to Midgard. Stark said most of the planet's climate was hot and damp and covered with vegetation. Loki did not look forward to it. It also seemed like the gravitation was higher than on their ship, but Stark said it would not be too hindering for him. The atmosphere was also suitable, which was the main reason they chose the planet in the first place, but still, hot and damp? It sounded like the worst combination. Stark called it tropical, but it sounded more disgusting than anything. All kinds of vermin love to populate such areas, and he was none too keen to deal with them. This time around, they entered the planet's atmosphere even without less trouble than before. Stark was getting good at flying. The landscape below them was indeed green. White clouds over endless forests and a lake or two scattered among the trees. It will be a bit harder to find a city in this land, Loki remarked. Luckily, this baby can fly a lot. If we don't find anything, we just head back to the ship,
the human told him. We really need a way to take a closer look at the planet from out of space.
But where would be the adventure in that? Stark asked. Loki shot him an incredulous look that made the human chuckle again. Just kidding. I am working on that, but seriously, I have like 110 different things to work on.
What was that about priorities?
Loki asked. I think making a suit to be able to fight or protect myself is more of a priority than a telescope. It's not like having to descend down here is such trouble. The worst thing that can happen is that we head back up to the ship after a nice flight over the forests.
If you say so,
Loki told him. He really was in no mood to argue with Stark about things like this. They flew for quite a while, exchanging words once in a while. It was mainly Stark chattering away, with Loki replying whenever there was actually something worthwhile to say. The human got better at making him participate in these idle talks. Many times, Loki only realized that they were talking about basically nothing once they were already conversing for a while. It was irritating. At least Stark mostly had important things to say, and only started the useless chatter when he was doing something that was not intellectually stimulating. Setting up the workshop took a long time, but it was hardly a task that required utmost concentration. Flying the Drake was again a mundane task, so it was not surprising that the human insisted on talking. Loki should have been more annoyed by this than he actually was, which was very strange. Stark was in the middle of a long monologue about how he might be able to make use of the empty bullet shells once he finished powering up his workshop when something big and green slammed into the aircraft. Warnings started flashing on the control panel, and Stark cursed as he lost control over the plane. He was gripping the wheel tightly, but the plane spun around from the impact and they were falling. Stark was switching over things, trying to stabilize the shuttle. "Stark! We almost reached the trees!" Loki yelled. "I know!" the human replied. Loki felt how they slowed down a little as Stark obviously turned the engines to keep them up. They were too close though, so despite slowing down considerably, Loki could already hear the cracking and breaking of branches under them as the Drake's bottom reached the top of the trees. "Hold on," Stark warned before they turned again and descended even further. They were within the trees now and moving forward, branches smashing into the windshield, but luckily not able to break it in. Then they were suddenly out of the trees a little and they slammed into the ground. Stark cursed, breathing hard, still gripping the steering wheel. Loki was not much better off. He could feel his heart up in his throat. "Good job," he praised. "At least they landed in one piece." "What was that?" Stark asked, yelled, really. He was obviously not over the shock of it all. "It looked like a dragon." "A dragon." Now the human's tone was almost frenetic. "Or a lizard with wings. I don't know," Loki said, catching his breath. Stark finally let go of the wheel and leaned back in his seat, taking deep breaths to calm down. "Fucking hell." "Do you think we could take off again?" Loki asked. "I don't know," Stark answered. But he leaned forward again and started checking the shuttle systems. The best way to prevent Stark from being overwhelmed too much was to give him a task to focus on. This seemed to work this time too. "Most things seem fine. I'm gonna have to restart the system somehow though, because everything went crazy from this landing." "You do that." Loki nodded. He leaned forward to look outside. They were on a very small clearing. They landed on some fallen trunks, but at least they didn't have any branches above them, so taking off again shouldn't be a problem. "Something must be stuck in the left engine," Stark said suddenly. "Probably a branch. I'm gonna take a look." "Want me to go?" Loki asked, wondering why he did a moment later. "Nah, just gonna look at it. If I need help removing it, I'll let you know," he said as he stood up and went to the back. Loki heard the door opening and then Stark's footsteps as he walked outside. Loki watched as the systems came back to life on the control panel, stabilizing one after another. Luckily, the Drake was not so easily damaged. Surely, if they suffered any damage at all, they will be able to repair it once they were back on the ship. He waited another few minutes for Stark, then stood up as well. He didn't want to waste time just because the stubborn human refused to come back and ask for help because he was too weak to move a branch. Stark was stubborn about the strangest things sometimes. He walked outside and was hit in the face with damp, warm air. He was right. It was a horrible combination. "You know, I have offered my help to get out of here quickly," he said once he stepped outside. He walked around the plane to get to the left engine, then promptly stopped when he saw no one. "Stark?" He was immediately on alert. He heard nothing while inside the shuttle. "Stark!" he called again. He quickly went to the other side as well, but the human was nowhere to be seen. "Stark!" he called again, but there was no answer. The forest was unnaturally quiet around him. There should have been noise, the sound of life, birds and insects, but there was nothing. He looked around once more, but he saw nothing but trees and plants. The silence was mocking him with its perfection. Since Stark would not be stupid enough to wander off on his own, it was obvious that he was taken against his will. It took Loki a little time, but he found some trails in the end. It's been years since he had to track someone or something down in a forest, but it did not mean he couldn't do it still. He concealed the Drake with the blood sigil, then followed the trail. He had no time to waste. If he was fast enough, he would be able to catch up with them soon enough. It became quite clear after a little time that this was not happening. First, the trails only showed the footmarks of a few. One was Stark, one who held him, almost dragged him, two more following behind them. But then the trails turned into the tracks of four-legged animals. 3 of them. Obviously the animals they were riding. Not horses, though. The tracks showed 4-fingered legs with claws. Considering the winged creature that hit them, they had to be some sort of reptile. He really started to hate reptiles. Were there any other species in this damned galaxy at all?
He had no idea how fast these animals could be, but he followed the trail. Maybe he had no chance to catch up with them, but obviously they had to stop eventually. Walking through the forest like this reminded him of all the hunts he went on, at least once a year, but sometimes more, whenever Thor... This was not the time to think about that, buffoon. He kept going. The forest stayed suspiciously silent around him, and it did not fail to unnerve him. Nothing that seemed to be so full of life should be this quiet. He really started to wonder what happened here. Also, this was the last time he let Stark pick a planet. He would be the one to decide where to land from now on. The ground beneath his feet was damp and full with rocks and roots, which made walking difficult. There were lianas and vines hanging from the trees, and not once he had to crouch down or climb over rocks to move forward. His boots were covered in mud, his hair started curling at the ends from the damp air, and his clothes were dirty already. If Stark was alive, he was going to kill him for this. It was ridiculous that he had to travel through a forest like this to find one annoying human. He needed him for the ship, he kept reminding himself. He had to get Stark back. Night fell, and he still did not catch up with the ones who took the human. The trail was easy enough to follow, and Loki did so until it was too dark even for his eyes to see it. He hoped that whoever took Stark also stopped for the night. He sat down on a log and used a spark of his power to light a tiny fire. Not for warmth, obviously, but for light. The silence of the forest was deafening. He was wary of beasts, but in this silence he would be able to hear whatever was approaching. He did not sleep, though. He just waited for the sun to rise again. He cursed the blasted creatures Stark's captors rode on. The trail was easy to follow, but it was never fresh. It felt like he was always a few hours behind them. Stark better be alive. He was going to slaughter every single one of the creatures if he was not. Maybe he will slaughter them anyway, just for making him follow them through this wretched forest. He was well into the day when he finally heard something. He quieted down his steps and sneaked closer, careful not to be noticed. The sun was already setting, and the dusk would help to get closer unnoticed. It was as he expected. 3 who walked on legs, and 3 quite disgusting-looking lizards that were harnessed like horses. And Stark, luckily alive, although a little beat up, was tied to a tree next to them. The men looked like barbarians. They were wearing roughly sewn leathers, carried spears, and small blades. Probably they were scouters for a tribe. He really did not know why they wanted Stark, but he really did not want to guess either. He waited until the 3 went to sleep, which did not take that long. Even their mounts curled up next to them into a slumber. He did not know how light their sleep was or how good the creature's smell could be, so he made sure the wind did not blow from his way and sneaked closer as quietly as possible. Stark was luckily awake, but Loki did not reveal himself to him, not wanting to jolt any reaction out of him that would be too loud. It was the sound of Loki's final step that made Stark stiffen in alarm, but Loki slid his hand over his mouth quickly before he could make a noise. The human relaxed right away, recognizing him. Loki slid his blade out of his boot and went to cut the ropes. He considered slowly walking closer to the reptilians and their lizard creatures to kill them in their sleep, but he was cautious of the beasts. They were huge, large claws on their legs, sharp teeth in their mouths, and the riders also had weapons. He was not sure about their chances against them. Stark was unarmed, and Loki only had his blade. He should have brought a gun, unpleasant feeling be damned, but he did not expect the beasts when he started following the trail. He rarely felt this stupid. He should have thought this through instead of taking chase immediately. Once the ropes were cut, Stark turned and moved closer to Loki. His every step quiet. Not as quiet as Loki, but good enough. Loki grabbed hold of his elbow and started leading him away from the creatures on a relatively empty pathway to among the trees. Neither of them spoke, and even their breathing was silent as possible. The further away they were, the quicker their steps became, and soon they were moving forward in the dark a lot less carefully. Loki could still see quite well, and he did not let go of Stark's arm so that the human could keep up. "I have never been this glad to see you," Stark said once they were far enough. "I don't know where they came from. I was walking to the engine, and next thing I know, I have my mouth sealed and a rope around my arms." "Do you know what they wanted from you?" Loki asked. "I don't know. One of them kept talking to me, but I don't understand, of course." Stark's voice was scratchy and breathless. He was obviously tired. "It doesn't matter," Loki said. "We have to keep going until they're asleep. I really don't want to fight those beasts they're riding."
Why didn't you bring a gun at least? Stark asked. My gun from the Drake, at least? The human asked. I did not think it would be needed. A gun is always needed. This is the new law, okay? Always have a gun. Quiet! We're not that far away. I can't see a thing, Stark complained. I can, so just keep close to me, Loki told him. Stark did so without arguing. It was almost dawn by the time they heard the noise behind them, branches breaking, the sound of feet moving on the ground. They caught up with them. There was not much to do. They ran. They were not that far away from the Drake, but also not close enough. Running was useless in the end, but it was only one rider who found them. One moment the noise was coming from behind them, the next the giant beast lizard was on the trunk of a tree right before them. They both stopped and started at them. The lizard climbed it down to the ground, approaching them. Loki grabbed his blade and took a step forward. Stark would not be able to fight, but Loki would be able to defeat one of these things. Hopefully the other two were far away. Run, Stark! Loki said quietly, eyeing the approaching lizard and its rider. You're gonna fight? Stark asked in an almost panicked tone. I can take some, Loki told him. Just run as soon as they attack. Maybe Stark wanted to argue, but there was no time. The lizard leapt, Stark ran. Only the rider jumped off the back of the beast and attacked Loki with his spear while the beast followed Stark. Damn it! Loki dodged the spear and sliced with his knife, but the man was skilled enough to avoid him. Fast, too, but that did not mean he would be victorious. Some savage reptile could not defeat him. It took a few minutes, but finally Loki managed to grab hold of the spear and stabbed the rider in the gut. He took both weapons and ran after Stark and the beast, hoping he was not too late. Stark was cornered. It was a miracle he could avoid the lizard for this long. He was a smart human. He knew how to survive. He was almost impressed. Loki was running as fast as he could because he was still too far away to aid the mortal. Stark held a thick branch in his hand, which was his only weapon against the vicious beast. The beast was only playing with him, waiting for his master to give him order to kill, probably, but soon it would attack even without an order. Its tail was moving in an agitated manner. Stark managed to piss it off. He was very good at that. Two things happened at the same time. The beast finally charged, and Loki got close enough to throw the spear. Stark's scream of pain came a second sooner than the beast's screech. Loki's spear was one moment too late. He ran again. Stark was on the ground, the lizard on top of him. Its teeth had sunk into the mortal's flesh, while Loki's spear was sticking out of its back. Loki wasted no time when he got there. He sank his blade into the beast's head from the side, piercing its skull and killing it. Stark's shirt was red from all the blood flowing from the wound, and the giant lizard's teeth were still embedded into his flesh. Hold on, Stark, Loki said. This will hurt. He warned, then he broke the dead creature's jaw to free Stark from its teeth. The human put his hand on the wound right away. Shit. Fucking shit. God damn it. Stark cursed with a trembling voice. We're close enough to the Drake, Loki told him. We only have to walk about longer. I can't walk, Stark said. Of course you can. First, he needed to tie the wound with something. Stark's shirt was in tatters. That would not hold. So, for the lack of better options, he pulled his own shirt over his head and tore it in half. He pulled Stark into a sitting position to tie it around his middle. The wound was on the side of his abdomen. It looks worse than it is, Loki said. Yeah, I know. Stomach wound. Bleeds like a bitch, but I won't die for at least a few hours. You won't die at all, Loki told him sharply. We need to go, he said. I tell the other two is far away. He helped Stark to his feet. He put an arm around his middle and pulled his arm over his shoulder. He could carry most of his weight like this. Can we reach the Drake before they find us? Stark asked. If we hurry, Loki told him. He dictated the pace, and while Stark was moving very sluggishly, he kept up as much as he could. Just don't lose consciousness. I told you to bring a gun, Stark wheezed out. Yes, you were right. That's what you want to hear. Stay quiet, Loki hissed out. I think they could follow the scent of the blood anyway. They will be following a trail of your limbs if you don't shut up. I can't go this fast. We need to slow down. Yes, you can, and no, we won't, Loki told him firmly, and gripped Stark's waist a bit tighter to urge him on. The Drake was already in sight. Stark was stumbling and crumpled next to Loki by the last few feet, but the god easily kept him upright, taking him inside. Stupid human, causing him this much trouble. He barely took a step inside when he heard the sound of one of the beasts nearby. He put the human down and turned to close the door. The lizard creature slammed into the Drake a second after the door closed. It started clawing at the door immediately. Stark was motionless on the floor of the shuttle when he turned back around. Loki's shirt was soaked with blood over the wound. He crouched down next to him despite the sound of claws coming from the outside. The beast wanted to get in.
By the 9, if you die on me, Stark, you will regret it,
Loki told him, but the human was unconscious and did not react to his voice.
Stark!
The beast climbed over the top of the shuttle and was now on the windshield trying to claw its way inside there, and Stark did not react. So we shook him again.
Stark!
He yelled, but there was no reaction.